As I said previously, I've added the PowerPoint and the plain text version of the PowerPoint, if that's how you prefer to go along with this workshop. So my name is Audrey, and I am the Accessibility and Campus Engagement Officer at the Ability Co-op, and we are a 100% disabled student group that aims to increase accessibility around the campus, and we are starting to push to around our Irish higher education in general. So why is my presentation important? Around 12% of the student population at Trinity is registered with the Disability Service. So it's quite a large minority group. So that's why I think it's important to make sure that our societies are accessible so that this 12% and those who are undiagnosed can also participate in society life and part of the society's committee as well. So I will talk for about 30 minutes, and then afterwards, Kiara, the person who did the presentation last year, will talk for about 5 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A, which will not be recorded. So please feel free to either ask questions or put them in the chat. So first thing we have to do is look at some definitions. Inclusion is about making sure that people feel like they are welcome in a place. People feel like they can participate in the activity and in the society's committee just as much as other people. If someone is able to get to an event, and because it is accessible, but then they are not included in the conversation or in the decision-making skills in a committee, for example, then they are not included. Inclusion is like the end point of what we are trying to do with the Ability Co-op. Now, second important definition is accessibility. Accessibility is not just physical access to buildings, because disability is not just about mobility. So there are many different ways to be accessible, which I will explain a little bit today. And accessibility is about making sure that everyone can participate fully, even if this participation looks different. For example, someone might want to ask a question by speaking, but they can equally ask a question by sending me an email afterwards or writing in the chat. So all those ways are ways they can fully participate in this workshop. Last thing is ableism. For disabled people to truly feel included, we have to make sure not to be ableist. Ableism is the discrimination or prejudice against people with disabilities. This could be systemic. For example, many buildings around Trinity are not accessible, but this could also be microaggressions or very personal, like saying someone doesn't look like they have a disability or that they talk well for having a certain disability. So the Ability Co-op's main recommendations are to have an inclusion and accessibility officer, to advertise if your event is accessible or not, and to implement universal design. So what is an inclusion and accessibility officer? It's kind of like an equity role, but specifically for disabled students. Now, we understand that based on the size of your committee and size of your society, this might be an individual role, or it might be part of an equity role, as well as including postgraduate students, mature students, women and gender minorities, and people of color. So I think how you want to implement this definitely depends on your society size. So the first and most important thing that they would do is address specific accessibility requests. For example, someone could ask for ISL at a certain event. ISL is International Sign Language. And so the Inclusion and Accessibility Officer would be the person who books the ISL and then gets it refunded by the disability service. They also need to make sure to adhere to college policy. There are two policies by the college which are relevant to societies. First is the equality policy, which states that all students should be able to equally participate in all aspects of student life, which of course includes society, and the accessible information policy, which states that all info and media must be accessible. This includes any info and media produced by societies. And then by making sure that they adhere to this college policy, they of course have to make sure that their events and meetings are as accessible as possible. Of course, sometimes it is not possible for everything to be accessible. They can also train other committee members in how they can make their role more accessible or how their role might touch certain accessibility issues. For example, the communications officer might have a plain text version of their email. And so the inclusion and accessibility officer could train the communication officers on how to do a plain text version of the email and how to best advertise it to other students. And the last thing they have to do is evaluate and reflect on if their society is accessible, in what ways it is not, and also keep up with accessibility information because it is changing quite rapidly. The next big important thing to do is to advertise whether an event is accessible or not, and in what ways it is accessible or not. So you could advertise if an event is accessible mobility-wise. Would a person in a wheelchair be able to enter the space? Is there an accessible toilet nearby? Is it neurodivergent friendly? Have you given a schedule beforehand? What's the noise level like? Are the lights harsh? So an immunocompromise would be like, is it safe for people with a weakened health system? And so you would add this on your event advertisement. There are some examples which I will show you on the next page. You also need to make sure to add some way for students to reach out for disability accommodations. This can be a form that you put on your link tree or in your email, or you could just have your email address saying that they can contact you for disability accommodations. Certain disability accommodations they might request is ISL. However, ISL needs to be booked 2 weeks in advance, which means that you need to advertise your event at least 3 weeks in advance so that there is a chance for you to book ISL. As I have previously stated, ISL is reimbursed by the college. Next thing that someone might ask is a HEPA filter. Currently, you can only use a HEPA filter in the disability service. However, the CSE will be offering HEPA filters, which you will be able to book over the coming year. HEPA filters are basically big vacuums/fans that take out 99% of germs in the air, which make it a lot safer for people who can't get ill to come so that they can come to events. If there is food, you will also need to have a dietary restriction form. This usually includes if someone has allergies, if someone needs to have a vegan or a gluten-free option, and also if they would like the list of ingredients for everything that will be at the event. So here are some examples. The first example is from the Dunes email. They send out this once a week, and for each event, they have a little description about where the location is, a wayfinding video about how to find it, what the physical access info is like, and what the sensory info is like. Here you can see that they say they don't have a dedicated quiet zone. So they write what they don't have as well as what they have. And then the second example is from the VDP website. For every event that the VDP has, they have a section on their website which talks about mostly the physical accessibility, but a little bit about the sensory accessibility as well. There is no right way to do this accessibility advertisement. So you could do it on social media, you can do it on your website, you can do it in your link tree. It's really up to the society how they wish to do this. So our last key recommendation is universal design. Universal design is about when you build something, usually it's to do with physical things, but can also be something like an event. You think of accessibility from the start of the creation thing, instead of thinking of accessibility once it has already been created. This is not necessarily super easy in Trinity because most of the built environment in Trinity has not been designed following the principles of universal design. However, an example of this in practice is that, for example, if you are doing a disco night, someone might come up and say, oh, it's really loud, can I have some headphones? And then a committee member will have to look around for some headphones to give to the student. Instead, if you think about accessibility while building the events, there are multiple things you can plan. For example, you could have headphones and earplugs advertised when you advertise the event, and also next door so that people could bring it. You could have a dedicated quiet room, or you could have like a loud room and a quiet room in the disco, or you could do a silent disco depending on how much space and how much money you have to spare. Final thing is that design for accessible people helps all of the student population. Academically wise, the reason why we have access to lecturers' notes after a lecture is because disabled people push for that. And so similarly, if, for example, an event is moved to an earlier time to accommodate disabled people, it will also accommodate people with long ways to go back and from to school, or student carriers. Now, if we're specifically looking at events, these are the major guidelines that I have. They are, of course, not everything. I could spend hours talking about this, but this is what I think is most important. So I've split it up into the different sections of planning of an event. When you start to plan an event, I think you should be thinking about putting it in a physically accessible room. On campus, this is currently the atrium rooms, the disability service, certain rooms in the arts block, and certain rooms in the business building. If the event is going to be long, there should be seating options. Although you might think that there would be no need to sit, someone who is chronically ill or chronically fatigued will want there to be a seating option. Sometimes the most accessible thing to do is to have a hybrid event because someone can do it from their house where they control everything that's there, and so they might be in an accessible space, and then they can join your inaccessible events. Another way to do this, if your event doesn't suit being hybrid, is for it to be recorded. Another thing that you might think of is having a dedicated quiet room. If your society isn't very big, you could signpost a dedicated quiet room that already exists around college. I believe there is one on the ground floor of the art block, but that closes after 6. Another thing to think about while planning are hearing loops. Hearing loops is something a speaker puts on, which directly connects to hearing aids and allows people who are deaf or hard of hearing to hear the speaker more directly. These are in specific rooms on the campus in a link which I will share to you afterwards. Last thing to think when planning the event is, when is it? For most disabled people, during the night, it's not super accessible, but of course, for some people, it might be. So what I recommend is you have the same event, you have it once in the morning, you have it once in the evening. You might not have it on the same day every week. So once on a Monday, once on a Wednesday, for example. Now, when advertising the event, you should have alternative text for any pictures. Alternative text just describes any picture. For example, for this PowerPoint, I could say it's a purple PowerPoint with black text that says event guidelines, and then so on and so on. I would explain everything that is written. This is especially important in advertising on Instagram. There is a section on Instagram while you're posting that will let you add alternative text, but you can also add it in the description. Alternative text is sometimes also used in conferences or in descriptions when describing yourself before you speak. For example, you could say, I am a white person with short blonde hair wearing a red hoodie. And so when introducing everyone before a formal event, this would let blind people know what everyone looks like. Another thing is when you're doing any type of posters or PowerPoints, there should be large text for PowerPoints and posters. We recommend at least 12 pt, and it should be in accessible fonts. These are the ones without serifs, which are the curly points, certain fonts, and there should be an adequate amount of contrast. However, black and white isn't super accessible because that can be very bright. So black over off-white is the best if you're looking for black and white. Another thing is a plain text version, which is basically taking a PowerPoint or taking something with lots of images and just having only the text. And this makes it super easy for someone with a screen reader to understand your information. If you're going to have any video element to advertising your event, you should add subtitles to it. Transcriptions are sometimes necessary if there is something on the video that is not said. So for the transcription, you would have everything that is said and also anything that is written or important in the video that is not explicitly said. And this is usually a PDF instead of being input in a video like captions. Another thing you can do while advertising your event is to have a specific timeline of the event sent to attendees. This could be like, we arrive at 2 p.m. for 1 hour, we talk, for 1 hour, we eat, so that people can show up to the part of the event they would like to go to, especially if they don't have a lot of energy to spare. And also for autistic people to be able to like mentally prepare themselves before they go to an event. And while advertising the event, as I previously said, should have some type of accessibility requirement form or contact person. Some of the accommodations they may request are ISL, HEPA filters, hearing loops, or more information. This could look like, oh, how many people tend to come to this event, or do you have pictures of the same event from last year? And this is again about allowing people to prepare for an event or to have more information about something so they can make an educated decision on if they want to come or not. During the event, it's not a bad idea to make sure it is necessary to include everybody and to make sure not to let ableism slide, so you to confront it directly. It can also be important to signpost the inclusion or equity officers so that in case something goes wrong, then they are able to go to that person without having to ask who they are, and so bringing more attention to themselves. After the event, you might ask for feedback from the attendees and reflect with yourself and your other committee members if there were any requests you were unable to meet. For example, the Ability Co-op got a request for ISL for our panel talk last year, and unfortunately, it took longer than what was expected, and so we were unable to fulfill this request, which is why we recommend now putting the advertisement 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks of a big event. Now, an example, for example, say you wanted to have a coffee hour. How might you make this more accessible using the format that I used last slide? When planning the event, you might want to host it in the atrium, which is physically accessible, and there's a physically accessible toilet nearby. You could put a wayfinding video on your Instagram or on your email so that new first years or exchange students will be able to find the room. You might have a quiet coffee hour and a loud coffee hour. This could be like 2 rooms happening at the same time, or 1 week quiet, 1 week loud. You could do it at different times every week. While advertising the event, you could say what type of milk and coffee and tea you have. You could say it's in a physically accessible room and describe the sensory experience. For example, there tend to be 5 people and it is reasonably loud. However, you are welcome to step out whenever you want. And of course, an accessibility requirement form. Someone might answer that form saying they want a HEPA filter. You could book it from the CSC, and you could also open up the windows so that the air gets circulated more often. Another person might ask how many people there are. And then during the event, you could introduce everybody. If I know that at QSOC during the coffee hours, everyone tends to say their name and say their pronouns, but however, it is comfortable for you to introduce yourself in your societies and make sure you have no ableism in the conversation. After the event is done, some of the reflections you might have is that you could open the windows without someone having to ask, especially when it's not winter, because not getting ill is good for all students, not just chronically ill students. And then you could also list a possible list of topics that are going to be talked about at the coffee hours so that, neurodivergent people are able to mentally prepare for these conversations. So finally, we have some general recommendations. Committee meetings should also be accessible. Most disabilities are invisible, so although you might not think that any of your committee members are disabled, they could be. Also, you want to make sure that things are accessible so that being on committee in the future is accessible to disabled people. Websites and emails also need to be accessible. On the resource pack that you will get after the session, there will be a link to a website describing how to meet certain accessibility goals for a website. because I cannot cover it in such a short presentation. It is also not, you're not allowed to ask about the specifics of someone's disability. If it is important, they will tell you. You should also not ask why someone is taking medication or what is the medication they are taking. Don't let any type of discrimination slide, ableism, racism, sexism, so that everyone can be included in your society. And it is also a good idea to have an anonymous complaint form for disability-related issues, but of course also for, unfortunately, sexual harassment or racism. Now, I have finished, so you can ask me any questions, or if you prefer to, you can email me at access@abilitycoop.org, or you can email the whole Ability Co-op at abilitycoop@gmail.com. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to ask Kiera, who did this presentation last year, if they have a different perspective or if they think I have missed any critical points. There's a technical issue. They're going to come on my screen.
Okay, sorry, my data wasn't working, so I'm here now. So I want to talk, like, I agree with all the recommendations Audrey has given. It's a similar format to the presentation I gave last year. But what I kind of want to focus on a bit, just for a minute or two, is the fact that you shouldn't be stressed about this. Like, you should be conscious of this, you should be thinking of this, but you shouldn't be stressed about this. If you're thinking, oh my God, I can't possibly include everyone, so I should just not hold an event, you're thinking about it wrong. Don't do that, right? So what we want to do is think of, look at the recommendations, look at the list, see a couple of things that you can change without stressing too much, without changing too much, right? Change it, keep that changed, and then the next time add something else on as well, right? There's no point in trying to change everything straight away. It's too stressful, it's too confusing, and it goes over your head, right? I get that. But what we kind of want to see happening is just one bit of change every time. And it might be the case where you change something this time and the next time you go, actually, I don't know what we can change. And send an email, send us a text. It's fine. We have a group of volunteers here. We want to help. So yeah, I guess I want to make sure that this doesn't come at the expense of anything. This is not like oh my God, we don't have the budget for a wheelchair ramp. Me neither. Look, I've made videos before and haven't captioned them because I haven't had the time to do it. There are softwares that do it now since I've made them. Some of them work, some of them don't, some of them don't get my accent. But it's important that you just try one thing, maybe try two things, put someone in charge of it or don't. It's not the end of the world, okay? And look, sometimes I'm curious, sometimes I'm nosy, sometimes I accidentally ask too much about someone's medication or disability. Okay, you know what? They can just tell you to shut up and you can just apologize. It's fine. It's okay. There's no strict rules. So while everything in the presentation is for consideration, don't try and do everything else because there are a lot of things there. Sorry about my Wi-Fi.
So, just to add to what Kiera said, you can also contact the disability service, and they are paid to do this, so they will answer you. As Kiera said, there are lots of softwares to help you with transcriptions, captions, other things that take a lot of time. And the disability service, or we will signpost to which resources we currently use. So I will end the recording and anyone can ask me questions or